Well, good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome everyone to today's forum. I'm Kate Warren. I am the director of the Greater Cleveland American Rescue Plan Coalition, which is housed at the Center for Community Solutions. And one piece of our work with the GCARB Coalition is bringing you, the community, together to forums like this where we can feature important opportunities for you to engage with our leaders about how these American Rescue Plan funds are being put to use in our community. Our coalition is advocating at the city and at the county and at the state level for an equitable and whole recovery from the pandemic. And we are also tracking how local and state governments are spending their ARPA funds. There's information on the table by where you came in about how to follow our work and how to get involved. And I invite any of you to join us in this work, and I'll share a little bit more about that at the end. I do want to take a moment and thank our funders of this work, the Cleveland Foundation, the George Gund Foundation, and the Mount Sinai Health Foundation. And I also want to thank our steering committee members, many of whom are here today. Maybe if you're on our steering committee, you could wave your hand a little bit so folks see who you are. Thank you all for all the work you put in. And with that, I would love to get started with today's forum by introducing our panelists. We are so grateful to be joined today by these four leaders from the city of Cleveland who have been working hard on shaping the initiatives that they're going to be talking about today that are funded by American Rescue Plan Act dollars. So to introduce the folks that are on the stage, Abby Paskey is the Transformative Project Specialist with the City of Cleveland. She has many projects on her plate, but she's been supporting Chief Bradford Davey and the Center for Economic Recovery with many of their initiatives. And we're very glad to have her here today to give us an overview of how the Center for Economic Recovery is making decisions about how to invest the city's ARPA dollars. Director Tessa Jackson will be joining us, and Tessa is the Economic Development Director at the City of Cleveland. She came to Cleveland from New Orleans, where she's been leading as a social entrepreneur and impact investment strategist, working at the intersection of business creation, community revitalization, and real estate finance for over 15 years. Next is Joyce Panois, who's the Director of City Planning for Cleveland. She came to the city from Midtown Cleveland, where she served as the Vice President of Community Development. And one of the projects she oversaw there was Cleveland Walls, a placemaking project that added 19 murals to the Midtown neighborhood and has provided some inspiration for the funds that she will talk about today. And last but certainly not least, Sonia Pryor-Jones is Chief of Youth and Family Success for the city. And in that role, she oversees not only youth initiatives, but provides strategic direction on how the city designs programs and strengthens services intergenerationally. Most recently, she served as the Chief Strategy Officer for the Boston-based FAB Foundation. And with that, we are very excited to have an opportunity to hear from each of these leaders about some of the important initiatives that they are helping to shape and shepherd. So we will hear from each one of them, and then we will have time at the end for audience questions. And so with that, I'm going to pass it to Abby.
Thanks, Kate, and thank you for the invitation for all of us at the city to talk to you about ARPA. So I am not one of our priority leads. I'm not a content expert, but I represent the Center for Economic Recovery, and I'm going to provide some context about how we've gotten to this first docket of initiatives. So when the Biden administration allocated the ARPA funds to local governments, these dollars did not come with an instruction guide on how to decide where this money is going. And as a result, we're seeing different processes that cities and counties across the country are taking on how they will distribute this funding. And as we all know, there are an endless number of challenges and wicked problems and worthy causes and incredible organizations that would love to see some of this money. So Mayor Bibb decided to approach this by creating the Center for Economic Recovery to come up with a process where we would be equitably and strategically looking at various proposals and initiatives to lead to transformative change and long-lasting change. So the goal in the process is to support our elected officials and use a consistent evaluation guide and evaluation criteria so that all of our decisions are grounded in strategy. So the center's work strives to make these once-in-a-lifetime funds something that are a federal investment that aren't spread so thin that we don't see long-lasting change. So these are the kind of the guiding principles that we have adopted as we approach this work. So over the past 5 months, the center has been meeting weekly to kind of support this process. So first, Mayor Bibb set out his 10 priorities, and those were based on the community input that he gathered during his transition, as well as his first several months in office. Then he selected priority leads, who are the content experts, so the subject matter experts, to kind of lead the different priority areas that I'll talk about in just a minute. The Center for Economic Recovery team is here to kind of guide the process, so we're the process experts. So this is the team listed here. It's a group of senior leaders in the administration, as well as 2 of our colleagues from City Council, Jessica Columbia and Ann Tilley, and Brad Whitehead, who's been advising us on kind of what the national landscape looks like. So we have been kind of these process experts. So over the summer, can you do the next slide, please, Kate? Over the course of the summer, our priority leads, our content subject matter experts, some of them are here with us, worked to develop strategic frameworks for each of their priority areas. And these included an overall vision, several goals, and then some success metrics that would indicate that we were working towards those goals. So all of these strategic frameworks are available on our website. And then what we did was the priority leads worked to create and compile proposals of initiatives that would then work towards those strategic frameworks. So these initiative proposals were grounded in what was already out there, what was already happening, what the community was asking for. An example is our housing initiatives came from the 10-year housing plan that the city had, as well as recommendations from local partners. Can you do the next slide? Thanks. So this is kind of the overview of our process. When the leads submitted proposals to the center, we evaluated them using the same 8 criteria. Those will be listed, I think, in the next slide. Thank you. So these criteria helped shape and strengthen the proposals that were submitted. So we were looking for how can we make these ideas longer lasting? How can we expand community impact? How can they be more environmentally sustainable? And then the center provided feedback to the leads on their initiatives that they proposed to try to strengthen these, as did Mayor Bibb. So once these kind of went through this evaluation and the mayor approved them, the leads made some adjustments, and then the Center for Economic Recovery staff had a sort of compliance process where we checked it with our ethics team, our law team, and external counsel. Next slide, please. So docket 1 represented about $103 million that we proposed to council. And this initial docket is pretty foundational. It aims to stabilize several of the systems that were rocked by COVID and lay some groundwork for longer term, more transformational work. So Chief Pryor Jones, Director Wong, and Director Jackson will walk you through what some of these initiatives look like and how they arrived there. Director Jackson, are you ready to go?
I guess so.
All right, I'll pass it off to you. Thank you.
Well,
one of the biggest things that you think about the pandemic was the disparities in impact. So we looked at, from the Department of Economic Development, we tried to look at some of the things that our approach to racial justice, equity, inclusion through the lens of how do we not just help people recover from this pandemic, but how do we look at what has happened in Cleveland long-term, like what I call it the long-term economic disaster. The slow decline, the loss of working class factory jobs, manufacturing jobs, and the disparate impact that it's had on people of color. And then said, how do we leverage the opportunities that we're investing in terms of housing, which is going to be 50% of the Docket 1 budget, to make that happen. So we focused on, our first initiative was the Minority Business Credit Enhancement Fund, which is really going to be targeted towards expanding the pool of minority contractors, I say, from underrepresented groups. So what we'll be doing is trying to help more contractors from those groups become what we call ready, willing, and able. So when I say ready, willing, and able, not just trained and prepared to do the work, but having the financial resources, the bonding capacity to actually take on those contracts and those jobs. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. So Opportunity CLE Fund is it's the largest civic fund, and we're investing $5 million kind of in a larger fund that is going to invest in opportunities in different neighborhoods. It's going to support developers to provide low interest, flexible capital, and it's going to allow more people to actually get involved in development, and hopefully those developers will be working in what we've defined as middle and opportunity neighborhoods.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joyce Wong, Director of City Planning, and I'm here to share with you a little bit more about the Arts and Neighborhood Amenities Fund. I do want to kind of give the bigger picture of where we're headed regarding arts and ARPA. As mentioned, this is only Docket 1, so this is the first entree, if you will, of many courses related to the arts. I want to kind of give the bigger picture of why arts matters here. So many people suffered during the pandemic. It was a very difficult time. Mental health, it was an enormous struggle, and I think that for many communities, specifically in our neighborhoods, experienced quite a bit of trauma through the process. It was a really difficult time, isolating time, and part of what we're trying to do here with this first docket is really change the sort of built environment, the physical environment, so that if you're walking around in your neighborhood, you feel that your culture or you are represented through the liveliness of what you see around you and what you experience around you. But artists bring much more to the table than just implementing art and creating art to be enjoyed. I think part of our larger strategy, which will begin to emerge Docket 2 as well, is thinking about how artists, through their thought processes and design thinking, can really address problems or issues in City Hall or in our neighborhoods with a very, very different lens. And so I think, again, not only are artists here to produce, but they're really here to help the process. And so we anticipate coming in the future that we'll have a lot more artist involvement within City Hall even, and much more involvement in planning processes within the City Planning Commission. And those are the types of sort of innovations that we're looking forward to over the next 3 or 4 years. But specific to this fund, this fund is meant to really bring arts and infuse them into our neighborhood built environment. So it's a very flexible fund, it's $3 million, and the intent is to see installations at scale be in our neighborhoods. So we're not talking one-off murals here or there, or sculpture or photography. It's where can we focus some of these efforts and really sort of infuse areas with arts. So it becomes a center of gravity in a neighborhood and a place of both joy and reflection, but also economic opportunity. The other way this fund can be used is really around transformative arts centers. So maybe there is a center of gravity that is located in one space that attracts a lot of youth and public programming. We really want to see this fund be used in a way that really allows those to flourish and to bless our neighborhoods, really. And so it's again, quite flexible. There's many ways that we can use it. I think that, to Kate, your point, there is inspiration from Cleveland Walls, which when I was at Midtown really brought forth a multitude of not just murals but public program, inspired young people to begin creating their own sculpture and to do their own shows, and installed art en masse. And I think those are the types of things that we want to see with this fund. Oh, I have slides. That's right. So this is just the title slide. If you can go to the next one. Again, this is talking about the soul of our neighborhoods and really kind of reinvigorating the soul of our neighborhoods. The next slide is the types of transformative projects that could be included in this fund. And then the next slide is really around the program criteria that we will evaluate proposals. So depending on the neighborhood, we really want to see investment in neighborhoods of opportunity where there may be a quote-unquote public art desert. We're looking at the east side, the southeast side, as well as the southwest side. If you could go back for a second, there should be a component of public program, whether that's youth outreach or youth involvement, community involvement, and a way for the public to see and touch and feel and be a part of the process. Of course, if there's funding match, that's always a great thing to see leveraged. We want to see folks be able to have the capacity to execute on some of these projects. We'll look at the percentage of artists involved that reflect the neighborhood. That could be local artists, it could be their backgrounds, racial, cultural, et cetera. And then also the community-based planning process. And so as a part of our ARPA process with City Council, we have established a review committee of 5 residents, 1 council member, and 1 arts organization guide, a 7-member body to review proposals every quarter to determine which are the proposals that we want to move forward on. And so, happy to answer questions when we get there. Thank you.
Can you all hear me? Okay. Now, I'm not sure if you're going to see a workforce slide and then a scholarship slide, but I'm just going to talk about both of these things together. I'm Chief Sonia Carter-Jones. I have the pleasure of working with these colleagues here on behalf of residents here in the city of Cleveland and talking with you today about the first docket of ARPA as it relates to our education for all, as well as our violence prevention and public safety areas of the work. And so, similar to what Joyce did, just to step back a little bit, earlier you heard Abby spend a little time talking about the framework in which the mayor's team has really taken upon a charge to think about how we would spend these once-in-a-lifetime dollars. The dollars are finite. We have lots of things that we need to solve in our community. But we are figuring out by way of the expertise that's in our room, but also the expertise that exists in the community. And so I can't talk about the work of early childhood without acknowledging our early childhood partners. A few of them are sitting here. It was very important to myself and Chief Holly Shapiro, we are the co-leads for the Education for All work, that we engage with community members that are out there actually doing the work as we are making some of these really, really difficult decisions. And when we think about early childhood in the Education for All framing, is where we all start. None of us in this room, doesn't have a story about the first time we entered a classroom, that first teacher that engaged us in our lives. And that happened, hopefully, for most of us at the age of early childhood. And we know that that is critical for communities, particularly communities of color, communities where there is a lot of poverty, because we know that the long-term trajectory for anyone who's had a quality early childhood experience It means something for how they enter the workforce. It means something for their quality of life. And so as we were thinking about this work, it was really important that we did our work to make sure that we were doing something to be both innovative while also helping to stabilize something that is so essential to our community. And so when we think about early childhood, we also have to think about the mothers and the fathers and the grandparents who rely on a high quality system where they can leave their children every day so that they can go to work. And so by stabilizing this part of the system, we believe we're also indirectly stabilizing the rest of the workforce system in our community. And so we wanted to focus in two areas. While the early childhood stabilization agenda is a broader one, there's a lot that needs to be done around policy as it relates to us thinking about how we are actually paying our early childhood care workers. We knew we couldn't do all of that at City Hall, but what we could do was to support a retention program that would allow us to help workers, many of them making about $29,000 a year, have some additional resources available to them. When you're making money like that, it matters to have a few $100s where you can make sure you can pay for your groceries. It matters to have a little extra money where you can fix your car and get to work. And so the incentive-based program for the workforce, in terms of retention, those bonuses matter. There's also what I like to call an attraction bonus. How can we get more people to consider and think about taking on roles in early childhood education? This is a tricky workforce market right now. There's a lot of competition, and so what is it that we can make available with incentive-based dollars to also try to attract people to join early childhood education as workers, the ones that we need. The second part of the early childhood incentive is really focused on our families, and that's scholarship dollars. And so many of us are in the community now talking about things like benefit cliffs, and how difficult it is for some of our families, depending on where they are in their life experience, to be able to afford and take advantage of a high quality early childhood experience for their children. And so these scholarship dollars are an opportunity on a sliding fee scale to support families, those who might be just getting back to work, those who might be making a transition, and so those dollars are there to support them. What we also know is important to the mayor's office is also equity. And when we think about the most people who are going to be impacted by this early childhood investment, about $4.5 million, we know that they are predominantly Black and brown children and predominantly Black and brown women. Since the city of Cleveland has such a high percentage of single head of household by Black and brown women in our community. Also, most of our workers currently in the early childhood education space are Black and brown women as well. And so that is a little bit about our early childhood investment. I think I'm also going to talk next, not sure if there's a slide, about the CIT co-response expansion. And so in the world of public safety, in the world of violence intervention and prevention, there are a lot of shifts and changes, things that were working before the pandemic and things that a lot of scholars and people across the country are trying to figure out right now. We have seen an increase in violence around the world, particularly gun violence. Many of our partners also saw increases in things like domestic violence during the pandemic. And so the city of Cleveland is spending our time doing a lot of listening and learning to figure out what are the things that we need to employ in order to really change the trajectory of safety in our community based on what works best for Cleveland. And some of that includes a level of experimentation, but some of that with this particular investment was really what we were seeing to start to have some good traction. And so this investment is to double the number of teams that we see utilizing the co-responder model. And so to go from 5 teams to 10, allowing for not only police officers to go out when they get calls, but also for them to go out in partnership with social workers to really help best support community members when they go out on the scene. In addition to this, because I know we're going to talk about it, we're also exploring other options. We know that there is a huge interest in the care response model. I've had a conversation myself with several people in this room about that model. So we're listening and learning. But as it was stated earlier, this is our very first docket. And so this is where we started with the work.
Well, thank you all for that introduction into these initiatives, and maybe for some context for our audience members, this is just a slice of what the administration is doing with their ARPA dollars out of this first docket. I helped organize and participate another forum a few weeks ago, which I'd be happy to share with any of you, on housing, which comprised about half of what was in this docket. And so at the Greater Cleveland American Rescue Plan Coalition, we just want to bring the community information on as much of this as we can. And now we have an opportunity to ask questions of these leaders about these initiatives. And we also, they're also here to listen and hear input on these initiatives. And I would say, as we open it up for the audience to make comments, if you have input to offer and not a question, we just ask that you be respectful of everyone's time in the room and keep it brief and respectful. But I will open it up to the audience for questions. My colleague Kyle Thompson is going to be roving with the microphone, so if you have a question, maybe try to catch his eye, and he will come to you for questions.
Hi. So, to touch on the co-response model, Cleveland continues to grapple with the consent decree. It has pursued policies and programs for alternative law enforcement responses to individuals experiencing a behavioral health crisis, notably through efforts through co-response. However, many other communities have implemented a care response approach, meaning that response is a health-first approach. It is unarmed, and it is without a law enforcement presence where appropriate. With community members and policy experts highlighting the need and the financial and medical benefits of this approach, will the DIB administration support enhancing its co-response efforts with a care response model in Cleveland?
I know Chief Pryor-Jones touched on that, but if you have anything you'd like to expand on in that area.
Sure. Thank you for the question, and I appreciate the work that many of our community members are doing to educate the administration about this as a viable option. So we are listening. As I mentioned in my statement before, I've had a couple of conversations with people who are part of our mental health community. I had the pleasure of listening in on a forum that Policy Matters hosted with the folks down in Cincinnati. And so we're all taking a close look at this. And we're going to be making a decision about where it plays out and how it might best play out in the work that we're doing.
If I could add to that too, just briefly. One of the most exciting things I think about the CIT initiative is that we are funding a senior strategist who will work to stitch together the mental health, the public health, and the public safety in the city of Cleveland. And so that strategist will kind of be thinking through what works best for the city of Cleveland, coming up with a longer term strategy, working out how we'll fund this sustainably, and looking at models across the country. So we're really excited about this strategist as well.
Hi.
Can you hear me now? Hi, my name is Gwen Garth, and I'm working with Neighborhood Connections on a adult literacy campaign. And we found that in 1961, Cuba increased the literacy rate to 100% in a year. Here in Cleveland, I have not heard anything about adult literacy. I think that before we even get to the early childhood, that we need to be concerned with the whole family. Okay, because if the child is learning a lot and the parents don't know anything, you still got that problem. So I would like to see some of this money go towards adult literacy as well as the arts.
Thank you, Ms. Barr.
Any other questions? I see a hand over there.
Hi, I'm wondering, how do you evaluate proposals around capital construction for nonprofit organizations? I think a lot of nonprofit leaders sort of view this influx of one-time funding as an opportunity, especially for organizations that have seen a large expansion and need for their services after the pandemic, or maybe have just been putting off renovations or construction for a long time. So I'm just curious, what criteria or strategy or ways you prioritize those kind of proposals?
Guess I'll take that one. Well, actually, ironically, we've been in City Hall having some conversations, with the City Council and departments, and I've been having them internally about how do we evaluate projects, be they nonprofit or for-profit, looking at them through the lens of community benefits. I'm on a working panel to work on a community benefits agreement that'll be kind of citywide, that will look at larger projects. But when I talk, I want to talk about something specific to my department, because we provide a lot of incentives for and resources for nonprofits and for-profits. We're looking at coming up with a community benefits scorecard where we look at projects before we commit to any type of incentive and come up with a scorecard. And we look at really what the benefits to the community is, what the impact of job creation is, what is accomplished by the end product. So I believe that by using that as a first filter for considering our incentive packages, we will benefit nonprofits in some of the capital improvement projects that they have, because nonprofits tend to have a community focus and do work that benefits the community. Does that answer your question, or?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, I work in workforce, and so I'm just curious more about what thought has been given to, especially under the Early Childhood Initiative, how we're engaging the private sector or employers, just because they would benefit greatly, from childhood care being more expanded, especially in our community.
And so we have a couple of experts in the room that could probably best answer this even better than me. But what I would say to that is we wanted to start with stabilizing actual classroom teachers, the people who are in the rooms with our children. But we do understand in order for us to do this work better and for it to be properly sustained, we have to do this in partnership with our corporate community. And I know that there are some early conversations with corporate community members about how they can be also partners in what we're doing to change the trajectory for workforce in early childhood. I think we also understand that we have to be looking towards additional policies at the state and federal level to better support the income of early childhood educators and workers in order for us to really sustain this as a solid way that people can work and live a high quality life and earn really high quality wages.
Hi, my name is Ann Hartnett. I'm a small business owner in Ohio City. I've operated Harness Cycle, it's a fitness studio, for the last 10 years. As you can imagine, I'm one of the small business owners, particularly brick and mortar, that was hit really hard. And I talk a lot to my peers who we've all had to pivot over and over. One of the things a lot of us had to do was take on debt to make it to the other side. And a lot of that debt is SBA, which is a variable rate. And with the Fed raising rates, I've gotten 6 increases in just the last 12 months of what that rate is. So I know that there's probably a lot of ideas and asks for small business and brick and mortar. But one thought I had, or question, is there any support in refinancing that debt and kind of controlling what we're getting squeezed on with inflation, with debt consolidation with some of these funds? Or are there any initiatives in particular to support brick and mortar, being that it's so critical to our neighborhoods?
I'll take that. Hi, we met a couple weeks ago. I think we just did an incentive package for you recently. Yeah. Well, and that kind of speaks to some of the stuff that we're doing. We're actually trying to look at our existing programs, the pots of money that we already have outside of ARPA, and figure out how we can leverage those to better help small business. Right now, we're doing I guess you can call it a hot map, and one of our fellows, Peyton over there, yes, I embarrassed you. She's actually been mapping out where we've been putting all of our incentives and what type of businesses we've been supporting in what neighborhoods and wards. And so what we're looking at is how do we reimagine our incentive programs and how do we address current needs and what those needs are. Because some of our programs are 5, 6, 10 years old, and they may not meet the needs of the changing business environment. So, and once again, we try to be flexible and innovative in how we structure some of our loans and our grants so that we work with businesses. Our goal is not to be a hindrance to business success, but to help aid it. So, and if you're having problems, please, circle back with Kevin and we'll see what we can do to help you. So. And I'd say that's just not a unique offer. That's kind of how we're trying to do things in economic development, figure out how we can support businesses and help them prosper. So.
Hi, good afternoon. So my name is Miranda Rogers. I'm with Partner with Possibilities Resource Center. And my question is, with a lot of the funds going towards the housing initiative and project, does that address anything towards families and women with children?
So I'm not directly over the housing funds, but I'm part of the cluster that has talked a lot about housing funds, so I'll try to kick it off and see if anyone else has thoughts. But I do think that, with the housing fund, which of course is $35 million, one of the bigger pots here, there's going to be criteria for evaluation. And I think your input is helpful with regard to supporting women with children and making sure that there's adequate housing. We know that I think that's a population that probably needs support around that. And, there are projects out there. Tri-C worked with CHN to do the scholar housing, which is a model that was tested, I think, in another city and now is broken ground here, where, if you attend Tri-C or if you're a single mom, you have, housing, you have childcare built into the very same building, and you have other services and support to help you make sure that you're successful both as a mom and also as a student, or I'll just say parent. And so, those are the types of inputs that I think could be helpful when we consider projects for supporting families and children.
And I'll add to that, if you can think about the fact that single mothers tend to be the most vulnerable group in our society. One of the things that I know Director Hernandez has been doing in community development is how do you look at, how do you consider kind of the spectrum of housing needs, from transitional housing to families who are facing chronic lead problems, and how do we get temporary housing for that. So I think just in how community development is approaching housing in general will benefit single mothers, because we're trying to look at it through a lens of vulnerability and resources and people who need resources the most. So.
Can I just encourage you? It sounds like you have a really specific thing in mind. And I'm sorry I can't see the person who posed the question. Thank you. So I'd love to connect with you after this so that we can find out in a little bit more detail what kinds of things you're thinking about, and we can take that back.
Good afternoon. Khalid Bob from Amigos. As a community development professional, we kind of look at things from a broader view. Community building. Oh, that's a lot better. Community building, and so I can actually, as we're building projects, I can see where I could utilize funds from each one of these funds. Will there be opportunities to look at that from a strategic perspective of how to do that community building within strategic areas.
That's a great thought. I think, we do have in mind that, these are not just funds floating out without place. And so I think that sort of place-based strategy is definitely something where we're maximizing impact in certain areas. So I think that's definitely worth a discussion and worth consideration.
Yeah, and I think you're only seeing a snapshot of the initiatives that the city is looking at. This is really just a few of the initiatives that are on the first docket, not the second. I mean, we are looking at doing corridor-specific projects. We're really looking at focusing on neighborhoods and kind of spreading the wealth. And I know that Famigos has been working in, trying to do some stuff in the Glenville area, and I've met with John, I've talked to Candace. I would say we're really out here in the trenches trying to figure out what the needs are. So from a community standpoint, community buildings point, everything starts with community. It starts with neighborhoods. So of course there's going to be opportunities to leverage organizations like Famigos. They're a key component in actually delivering some of these initiatives to the public. I mean, a lot of the stuff is going to be coming out through RFPs, at least on my end, where we're looking for teams to partner and to basically put this stuff on the ground. My staff cannot do this stuff. Joyce's staff cannot do this stuff. Sonya's staff can't do all this stuff. So we're looking for organizations to partner with, to work with, and organizations like Famigos are part of that bigger picture.
Can I maybe ask a clarifying question too? Are you talking about layering on different funding sources into one, so like pulling from different funds?
So arts, housing, childcare, all that together in one project. Or it's hard for us to plan without the funding sources there to plan these things. So if they're there, we can actually plan around that. And because a lot of these things are hard to finance just based off of our own goodwill.
Abby, do you have thoughts around that?
So a great question. I think Director Jackson kind of spoke to it, that there will be RFPs for the funds that are, several of these initiatives are creating funds, especially in the housing and the inclusive economic recovery buckets. So I think when those RFPs are released, when they're looking for different projects to fund, like out of these funds, that's where you'll kind of see maybe a clear sense of where you'll fit. But as of now, we're still waiting. Some of these are still working through council. They haven't been approved yet. So it's going to be a little bit more time before we have these funds set up and available for folks to put in proposals.
And I would just add, while I understand this is an ARPA conversation, many of our areas of work also have our own general dollars, right? We also seek federal dollars to support the work that we're doing. And my best, relevant example is the work that we're doing around violence prevention. We just received a $2 million grant from the Department of Justice to do community-based violence and prevention work. And doing that work from a health equity perspective, it sort of touches all of these things as well. And a significant part of that work in this process includes a community engagement strategy. And so City Hall won't just be saying, here it is, what we're going to do in community to solve these issues, but what we'll be doing is saying, how can we partner with community residents, organizations that are working on the ground to help us come up with solutions. And so I think at the heart of this administration is a group of leaders who want to listen, who want to learn, and do all of that in partnership with community members to come up with the right solution.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Dr. Jack. I'm just on with Step Forward. So I want to first say thank you. This is the first time I've heard a comprehensive approach to using these dollars. I want to circle back to something you talked about, the Scholar House. Sitting with you in Starting Point and Creeper Fleet. Step Forward is going to be responsible for the early childhood program in the Scholar House. One of the things that I heard earlier that I'm really appreciative of is the fact that you connected early childhood with workforce. Because at the end of the day, if I don't have a safe place to put my child, then I can't go to work. And just to provide the context for that, at Step Forward, we've lost 14% of our staff in Head Start since the pandemic. That means there are 100 vacancies in my program, which means 500 children will not be served. And we are competing against Target and Amazon. So I'm really happy to hear that there's going to be some dollars and some assistance for that kind of support for early childhood. So thank you.
Are there any other questions in the room here? I have a couple that I was emailed if I need to go to the email list. All right, well, I have a question for Director Wong. It's a question about why there is no requirement on the funds from the Transformative Art Fund project to support local artists specifically. So I know there was some discussion with City Council about whether there should be that requirement. So I wondered if you could share some context about that.
Sure, I'm happy to. So first of all, this is different than the funds that you saw come out from the Cuyahoga Arts and Culture and Assembly for the Arts, who is here in the audience. Those funds were specifically from the county, and they were relief dollars direct to artists. So I want to put that out there that this Transformative Arts Fund is not a direct to artist relief fund, but rather it is a neighborhood-based arts infusion. So around the note about local artists, part of the strategy here is, yes, ideally we want to support all the local artists we can. Defining local artists can be tricky at times because are they local specifically to the city of Cleveland? Are they local to the county? If they live in Bedford, can they go across the line to access the funds? And so I think just from a nomenclature standpoint, it can be difficult. But also, I think that, of course, we want to support capacity building in Cleveland, and that is part of the goal of this. I think programmatically it can get complicated because not only are you supporting artists, but you have to support the supplies and the lifts, and sometimes organizational capacity is not quite there yet from individual artist to artist, so you may need additional assistance from outside capacity that may bring in resources from outside of Cleveland in order to accomplish that. So we intentionally kept the fund flexible, and local artists will definitely be a part of this. It's just not putting too many stipulations on the money itself so that we can easily access it, if that makes sense for programs.
Thank you. I received another question that was quite broad, and so maybe, Director Jackson touched on it a little bit already, but maybe other folks have thoughts on this. The person who wrote is concerned about the city's capacity to carry out all of these new initiatives with the staff that they currently have. And so I wonder if you could address how the city is building capacity internally or working through the RFP process to make sure that we'll be able to effectively spend the dollars in the community.
As I stated, one of the things that we're doing is we are approaching some of these our initiatives through an RFP process where we will partner with organizations that are going to bring capacity building, capital, and training support to these initiatives, because all of those are kind of cobbled together and important to the success of each initiative. So that's really how we're going to leverage the department's capacity to have more impact in the city by basically bringing other organizations in. Our goal really is to have a 4-to-1 leverage on our funds and hopefully a 10-to-1 leverage on our staffing. And if everybody knows how big my department or how small my department is, they know that I'm serious about that 10-to-1.
Yeah, so I think that, and every fund will operate differently. So every fund will have, some will have RFPs, others will have perhaps senior strategists or partnership to bring on temporary staff in order to help work the contracts, in order to help work the administrative side, but also to set the strategy. So speaking for arts, this has not yet been determined for docket 1, but again, looking at docket 2, we're really hoping to partner and find, let's just say a 2-year person to be at City Hall to really oversee arts policy and strategy and work on integrating much more of the arts process and arts values into the things that we do. Because I know that we are very short-staffed. We only have one administrator who is focused on the arts, and it's purely like contract management, working with the entire network of all the artists in Cleveland, and she's very stretched for one person. So I think like really from a capacity building level, we're trying to build that additional sort of training. I think is how Jeremy from Assembly for the Arts put it, is building the scaffolding and the structures so that the infrastructure for more permanent arts policy and strategy in City Hall. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess it's important for for everyone here and for people who may be listening outside to realize that the goal of using these funds is not to build a bureaucracy, but to build capacity and opportunity. So we're not all trying to like create these behemoths and these large staffs so that we have a big power base. We're really trying to get things done. And if that means finding the best and the brightest and the best partners, that's what we're going to do. So
that was really well said.
That's a
very well said. And the reality is, if you go back and look at some of our criteria, we talk about sustainability, right? And so it is not a sustainable model to hire a whole bunch of people and then run out of dollars, right? And so I can only speak to what we're doing in this first docket, and that is contracting with partners who already have the infrastructure to push out the scholarships, to push out the retention dollars when it comes to the education and early childhood work. And then on the other side, with violence prevention, that is teeing up the opportunity to expand a service that's already working, and then revisiting some of the dollars that are already in place to help us continue to afford that long term.
Thank you all for that. I really appreciate those points because I think just in the scheme of how much this money is compared to, say, the city's general fund budget, it is a lot to think about expending all of these dollars by the end of 2026. So appreciate all the thought that you all are putting into that. I think we have time for one more question from the audience if there is a final question. It looks like we have all of our questions answered. How miraculous. Well, I do want to share a few important things that our GCAR Coalition has coming up, just so you all are aware. There's information on the table. We just this week, we opened applications for advocacy grants. And these are not just specific to ARPA dollars, but if your organization is planning to undertake advocacy activities in the coming year, these might be a good opportunity for you. There are flyers on the table that have some more information. They're smallish grants, up to $5,000, but we want to help build capacity, particularly among small organizations, to do advocacy. Also, my cards are on the table. You can feel free to contact me directly if you have questions about those advocacy grants. We also have another forum coming up on October 26th. I will have registration out, and I will be sure to share the link with all of you who registered for today's event. That forum will be about digital inclusion, which is another important thing that is being funded by ARPA, both at the city and the county. We will be featuring leaders from the city of Cleveland and Cuyahoga County, talking about ARPA-funded initiatives to increase digital access. So welcome you all to join us for that forum. And finally, part of what we do at the GCAR Coalition is put on forums like this, but we are also doing advocacy work, and we have started to form work groups to mobilize toward our advocacy agenda. If you take one of our flyers, we have 10 areas in which we are doing advocacy, and I invite you to visit the link or the QR code on that flyer, sign up to get involved, and I can get you information on how to link in with one of those work groups if that's something that's of interest to you. The more the merrier. We welcome anyone to join us in those efforts. We work on a lot of issues and welcome all of your expertise from your work in the community. So With that, I want to give a warm round of applause to our panelists and thank them for their time. We are very appreciative of all the work that you're doing to help our community recover from the pandemic and to help use these dollars effectively. And we're also appreciative of you taking some time to hear input from the community members that are here with us today and just how open the administration has been to hearing that input. So thank you. And with that, I hope you all will enjoy a cookie and visit and network, and our program is adjourned. Thank you.